Okay, let's give it a minute or so to let everybody start filtering in here. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Visualize Net Zero Energy 2030 Data and Tableau, presented by the Project Stasio and sponsored by Airlit Studio. Today's session will be recorded and available through the IBPSA-USA YouTube channel. If you have any issues hearing the presentation, please try calling in by phone instead of using the computer audio. This is a Zoom webinar, so you can participate by posting questions and comments in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be viewable by all attendees, and there is an option to submit anonymously if you'd prefer. We will have a Q&A section towards the end of the webinar to address your questions, but feel free to input them as we go along. You can also upvote or comment on questions that resonate with you. This session is eligible for an AIA credit. Please email admin@IBPSA-US to receive your credit. We welcome your questions, thoughts, and ideas as we continue to work toward IBPSA-USA's mission of fostering better buildings through simulation. And at this point, I would like to pass the time over to Alejandra, our sponsor today with Airlit Studio.
Thank you, Jackie. Hi, everyone. I'm going to go on to share my screen. Very excited to be here. All right. I'm going to ask you guys to nod. Jesse looks good. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much. We're extremely excited to be Project Stasio's webinar's first ever sponsor. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alejandra Menchaca. I'm a founder and principal at Airlit Studio and also a Project Stasio co-founder. So all of these topics are really near and dear to my heart. Airlit Studio is a pretty young boutique environmental design consultancy that is thoughtful and design-oriented. We're rooted in technical excellence and centered on occupant experience. Our services include environmental analytics, so anything from daylighting, CFD, energy modeling, as well as we have a very strong arm in natural ventilation design. We have been doing natural ventilation design within the partners at Airlit Studio for about 15 years, as well as we offer services for in-house skill development. And so if you're looking to identify training or growth opportunities for your in-house sustainability team, we're more than happy to help you. Airlit Studio was born out of many of the frustrations that we share with Stasio. This is a snippet of a presentation that I gave with Carlos Cerezo from KPF and Jacob Knowles from BR+A at AIA this year, where we did a survey. We surveyed architects asking them what were their biggest frustrations with energy modelers. This is a snippet of some of the frustrations, and I am sure that 99%, if not 100% of those of you on the call relate to them, whether you are a modeler or an architect, right? There's the, we speak a different language. It just feels like, meetings are long and, how do we pick if it's a shoebox or a full building energy model? And it's like, there's none of the comments, as you might notice, actually refer to the quality or the skill set of the modeler, but refer so much to communication and how much we're not quite communicating between architects and modelers. And so at Airlit Studio, we're very, very extremely sensitive to that. We've worked both in-house at architecture firms, at engineering firms, and at consulting firms as well. And we've made our motto, questions matter more than tools, which is very much aligned. I feel that Stasio has shaped a lot of my career, is very much aligned with Stasio, which Kritika will introduce a little later. But the basic premise of Project Stasio and what we've incorporated in our practice at Airlit Studio is making sure that when we're running an analysis or trying to answer a question that has to do with building performance, we always frame it in the format, what is the impact of a particular design variable on a particular design metric? What we have found throughout our careers is that oftentimes our frustration comes from the fact that someone asked well, can you please evaluate the impact of shading on lighting? And so we go off and then run an energy model for 3 weeks, and then we come up with an answer. And then we realize that by lighting, someone meant daylight, right? We should have been running the wrong simulation. You know, we've been running the wrong simulation, or they meant maybe lighting power density, and that was an MEP calc, right? And so we're very much focused on having this conversation with architects and asking the right questions. For any one of you who are not familiar with this format, encourage you to check out Project Stasio, because this is really the basic premise of Project Stasio. These are some examples that we've used in project work. You know, we're very, very much driven by questions rather than defining what tool we're going to use, you know. So we've used, you know, simulation to answer questions like, what is the impact of window location on indoor temperature, or shaft size on natural ventilation potential, or wind incidence on pedestrian comfort, et cetera, et cetera. You get a sense, but it's really focused on, well, what question are we asking rather than what simulation are we running? If any of you, if this resonates with any of you, I highly encourage you to check out our website, airlitstudio.com. We are also getting into the practice of writing blog posts. I feel many of you have commented on the wind roses. For any of you who didn't have a chance to read it, definitely read it. We're very strongly opinionated against wind roses, but check it out. So, you know, talking about the graphics of green roses, and we recently just published a blog post talking precisely about this AIA presentation that I gave on how to improve the communication between architects and modelers. And so with that, just to remind you, we're an environmental consulting firm that is pretty new. Would be very excited if this resonates with any of you, would be very excited to talk to you about either doing, you know, environmental analytics with you, natural ventilation design, but also if you feel like you want to improve your communication skill set within your firm, improve how you communicate with your mechanical engineering consultant, with your energy modeler, we're here for that, and would love to get an email from you. And so with that, I am going to pass it on to the amazing and fabulous Kritika, who is a member of Project Stasio and who will be moderating our session today.
Thank you, Ale. Thank you, Airlit Studio, for sponsoring this first ever webinar that we are having as part of Project Stasio. My name is Kritika Kharbanda. I'm the head of sustainability at Henning Larsen Architects, but I'll be wearing a different hat today, being a member of Project Stasio. Briefly mentioning what Project Stasio is, Ale did a great job explaining it, but just to say, it's an IBPSA sub-organization where the simulation community can actually learn from data visualization best practices and what insights they can provide in the actual design process. We are really driven by increasing our ability to communicate simulation data to clients, to the design team, and to each other. And we think that it can really add overall value of energy modeling or any other modeling or simulation that we do in our day-to-day jobs. I don't want to take a lot of time, and I want to give it over to the person of the hour today. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Jesse Walton. He's an associate principal at Malum Architects with more than 20 years of experience with educational clients. And Jesse is passionate about creating sustainable, healthy architecture. He is an office-wide leader in building envelope design, energy efficiency, and embodied carbon. He now co-chairs the National AIA 2030 Working Group and the Design Data Exchange Subcommittee. Both at Malum and AIA, he advocates for more robust data collection and visualization, which is the focus of his presentation here today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speaker. Over to you, Jesse.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Project Stasio and Alejandra, for the invitation. I am an architect by training and in practice, but I find myself having the most fun when I'm sitting in mechanical coordination meetings and talking about simulation, whether it's energy or modeling embodied carbon or creating bar charts to evaluate which decision is the better one versus creating floor plans and rendering. So I feel like I've found my people in IBPSA, and I'm really happy to chat with you all today about my work at Malum. So I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Screen one. Can y'all, I lost visualization. Can y'all see?
Yeah, looks good.
The title screen? Wonderful. Okay. So here are the learning units. I'm going to do a very, very brief history of data visualization, very brief. And then I'm going to talk about, as the co-chair of the 2030 working group, I'm going to talk a little bit about the AIA's DDX data visualization, just so that you are all aware of it. If hopefully most of you are AIA 2030 commitment signatories or work with firms that are 2030 commitment signatories, you can see the data visualization that the DDX is using. And then I'm going to dive into how to build your own interactive Tableau dashboard with Tableau Public. It's a free tool, and utilizing that 2030 commitment data inside of Tableau Public, which is what I've been doing at Malin the last handful of years. So this is me. I am a former ballet dancer from Brooklyn, New York. I am a very avid cyclist. When I tell people that, they ask me how many bikes I have, and I usually say about 5.5. I am an architect in Seattle, Washington at Malin. I'm an energy and carbon nerd in my professional life, and I'm a data visualization enthusiast in both my professional and personal life. I'm mostly going to talk about the last two items on this list. If you want to chat about the others, feel free to DM me, especially if you can figure out what that half a bike is there. So here we're going to dive into a very brief kind of why and history of data visualization. So the practice of data visualization comes from an understanding of how the human brain gathers and processes information. The brain only takes about 1/4 of a second to process meaning from graphical representation, but it takes about 5 seconds to read 20 words. The simple truth is we just process visual information much faster than we process text. So in the time it's taken me to say all that, I'm wondering how many of you all were able to actually figure out how many 9s are on here. The simple representation really shows the pre-attentive value of color and hue, highlighting the quantity of 9s, basically almost instantaneously. You can see there are about 13 9s. There are 13 9s in this this graphic, and this is really a inconsequential party trick at best. But when it comes to talking about the impacts of the built environment on the world, data visualization can become a much more important aspect of our work. So some of the historical examples we'll talk about that are more impactful than that party trick this first one is from the 1850s. It was done by John Snow. There was a cholera outbreak in London at the time, and the main point of thinking was that it was spreading through the air. They were really unsure about how cholera was spreading through the city. He had a hunch that it was being spread by the water, the pump systems throughout the city. So he created this map data visualization where he showed all of the deaths in a little black bar at each of the addresses, and then he showed the pump locations. And through this visualization, he was able to show the relationship between the higher quantities of deaths near particular pumps. Those pumps were locked and cut off. Cholera outbreak slowed and disappeared. And this type of data visualization was really part of the founding science of epidemiology. Another fantastic example, my guess is a lot of you have seen this, is Florence Nightingale's rose diagram, or polar area chart is the technical term for it. She was a nurse and a data visualization enthusiast as well. And the reason she created this graphic was she was trying to convince the generals and politicians funding the war to spend more money on the war hospitals, as the vast majority of the deaths that were happening were because of things that were not related to war injuries. They were hygiene related, they were sickness related. And so in this polar area chart, you're seeing in months as it goes around clockwise, The blue are all deaths attributed to non-war related injuries, and the red and the black are deaths attributed to war injuries. She presented this graphic. They said, oh my goodness, we should maybe fund our hospitals to clean up the conditions and make sure our soldiers survive so they can go on to fight. And the graphic on the left is what happened after the funding happened. So there was, still some deaths from things not attributed to war, but the deaths, the amount of deaths from soldiers and non-combat related injuries dropped off drastically after that investment in the hospitals. And we're going to jump ahead 100 years or so. So this was Al Gore's presentation in the early aughts, showing the power of data visualization when he was trying to communicate the correlation between CO2 emissions in the atmosphere and the global rise in temperature. When I saw this movie, I was, it's a very scary thing to see, and directly related to my profession. I had recently become, when I saw this movie, I had recently become a LEED accredited professional. But I was still really unsure on how I could make an impact day to day on my architectural work. And around the same time, the 2030 challenge came out, and it also used the data visualization to really beautifully show a path forward, right? It said today, it was around 2010, we want to strive to reduce our emissions, our fossil fuel energy consumption around buildings by 60%, and then every 5 years we will step that number down until we get to this beautiful future of carbon neutral. We're getting kind of close to 2030, uncertain if we're going to make it, but this was really a beautiful process map for me as an architect, and really shaped my future as an architect and what I was focusing on. So that was a very brief history in data visualization and some really important examples around impactful data visualizations in our culture. But now I'm going to jump into talking about data in architecture. So in my professional career, I got out of school in 2001. I actually learned how to draft by hand. We had a main line on our desk. But ever since then, the amount of data in our profession has really exploded. With building information modeling, we now quantify and schedule and calculate everything about the physical aspects of our building, geometry, quantities, everything about our building. So there's a huge amount of data there. And then in building simulations, which this group focuses on, whether it's energy or glare or daylight or wind or acoustics, there's just a vast quantity of data. And now there's this focus around the embodied carbon in our building. So beyond just the square footage of it or the volume of a material, it's what is the impact to the environment? What's the global warming potential to the environment? Now, I was not able to, unfortunately, figure out how much data in architecture has changed throughout the last 20 years that I've been in the profession, but I was able to find this one graphic on the bottom that shows roughly 100-fold increase in the amount of data being collected as a species on the planet Earth. So that is to say, there's a shit ton of data that we are all collecting in every aspect of our lives, but definitely in our professional lives as architects, and I'm assuming engineers here as well. Now, what we're doing, data in architecture, I feel like this is a little bit of poking fun, but I feel like data in architecture still often looks a lot like this. It's a lot of hand waving. It's talking about three-dimensionality. It's talking about space, talking about materiality. And I think mostly that's because we are not really taught about how to represent data in architecture school. I know I wasn't taught about how to represent data in architecture school. My hunch is that many of you maybe had that a little bit more as engineers. I would hope so. So what I've really done in the last 10, 15 years is really focus my time on how to quantify and display digital information and data about my project work to our clients and my peers. So I'm going to share some continuing education resources that I have used. On the left is Stephen Few's book, Information Dashboard Design. Really thrilling title, but it's actually had a ton of great content. Another book on the right is Cole Knaflack's Storytelling with Data. Really beautiful book, really simple graphics. She also has a blog and a podcast. And if you're into this kind of thing, which you are because you're here, I would definitely recommend Cole Knaflack's work. And there's, of course, YouTube. You can find everything on YouTube with to figure out how to use certain tools. So that's how I taught myself Tableau. I recommend Tableau Tim up there in the middle top, or Andy Kreibel from I think it's the Data School on the bottom. Both excellent teachers on how to use the tool of Tableau. So now I'm going to jump into some lessons learned, and I'm not going to share everything I've learned, but I'm going to share two things. The first, when thinking about data visualization, is the term pre-attentive values. Now, these are simply visual properties that we notice without using conscious effort. It's that same thing I was showing with the 9 example in the beginning. It really occurs before the conscious mind starts to pay attention. And it's really like an immediate cognitive experience of processing the visual world. Some of these pre-attentive values are length. The longer something is, the larger it is in quantity, or width, that thickness. These are really strong pre-attentive values, length and width. Orientation, size, shape, all these are pre-attentive values. And I would advocate for, when you're creating a visualization, that you think about which pre-attentive value tells the story of your data the best. Don't use all of them. I would say use some of them, and think about them consciously instead of just going with the defaults that are in your programs. So the second thing beyond pre-attentive values I'm going to talk about, this one might be a little controversial considering the Project Stasio's logo, is pie charts. I feel like there's maybe an epidemic of pie charts. I think we like them as visual tools because they are a circle, and circles are simple and they are beautiful, but they are often not the best way to represent the scale of something, how big something is for one thing compared to another. I think this example tells you that pretty instantaneously. Is D or C bigger in this pie chart? I'm not really sure. I think it's D, maybe it's C. They're pretty close. That's all I know. But when you look at it in a bar chart, it is immediate. You understand that C is larger than D. So I would advocate that most of the time when we're trying to compare data, that we look at bar charts instead of pie charts. That said, there is a time for a good pie chart. I would say when you're comparing between 2 and 4 things, it's okay, because you can see quarters very easily. That pre-attentive value of area, you can do at 25%, 50%, 75%, but the pre-attentive value of length in a bar chart is much more instantaneous to see, especially when talking about smaller percentages, 15 versus 10%. Okay, so those were my 2 lessons learned: pre-attentive values, bar charts most of the time. Now I'm going to put on my AA 2030 commitment co-chair hat and talk about the Design Data Exchange. One, because I'm a passionate volunteer around this, and 2, it's because really all the professional work I did at Malum, we created this data that I then visualized. So if you have not used the Design Data Exchange, it's got a comparative screen that lets you compare your project in this blue bar to messed over on your actual try. Oh shoot, you're right, Gwen. It's at the office. I can't put it on. Firm average, and then similar projects in the DDX. You can change the date on this. You can change it from last year to this year. There's also progress visualization, which is just a line chart. The x-axis is time. So every year you put in a predicted energy use intensity or net PUI reduction. It will graph it for you. But then this graphic on the right here, which is basically a table full of numbers, is newer, is an update to the DDX in the last year, where it shows you your baseline target, gross PUI and net PUI, as well as your operational carbon and operational carbon intensity, so carbon per metered square up at the top. I would advocate, if you are signed up to the 2030 commitment and you've been tracking diligently your PEUI and your reduction for years, I would advocate for you to dive into fuel sources and really think about how many kilowatt hours, how many therms, how many kilowatt hours you're getting back from renewables. Instead of just that PEUI number, think about the actual energy going into your building. And there's ways for you to put it in to the DDX here. And when you put in your fuel sources, you get out a better understanding of your operational carbon intensity inside of the DDX. And then there's the research page. I'm actually gonna jump into, I'm gonna stop share so I can actually show this. Let's share screen. Screen 2. So this is a new tool in the DDX. It allows you to compare your project or a series of projects to the entire data set in the DDX. So you can have a project spotlight. I'll pick a project, and then you can select project use types. Most of the work I do is in K-12, so I'm going to pick that. You can pick the number of reporting years, minimum and maximums for areas. I'm going to leave most of that blank. I'm not going to select any specific fuel sources, and I'm going to say, show me both energy modeled and non-energy modeled projects. I'm maybe also going to select my climate zone. It's a nice way to filter out so you can compare your project work to the project work in your particular climate zone, because the performance hopefully would be similar. And then you hit the filter button. Are you all seeing screen 1? You're all seeing the DDX, correct?
Yeah, looks good.
Yes, wonderful. Okay. So you hit the filter button, and then on the bottom here, it gives you a box and whisker chart. It shows you on top the 2030 DDX data. So this bar chart represents 78 projects out of the DDX. So that is K-12 projects in the climate zone, in climate zone 4C, and that are reported in the years 2024, 2023. Really, it's probably only 2023 because 2024 hasn't happened. We haven't reported that those projects yet, compared to all the projects at Malem that fit that same filtered data, which is 16. You can do things like zoom in if your whiskers are too large and you want to look at the data in a little bit different way. You can also change if you're looking at net PUI or if you're looking at PUI reduction, so it changes it to %. You can also look at operational carbon intensity. Okay, I'm gonna stop share and start share again. Screen. Okay. Okay, back to here. And then I want to talk about the AIA DDX updates in the future. So the AIA partnered with a whole host of organizations that share our passion around quantifying embodied carbon specifically. What I was sharing before was energy efficiency and operational carbon, but as architects, we're also now focused on embodied carbon. And so all these organizations have a vested interest in making sure that we are quantifying our embodied carbon on our projects in the same way, using the same metrics and then the same nomenclature. So the ECHO project recently came out with a framework that all these partner organizations are going to use. So we are going to integrate that nomenclature and those metrics into the DDX. There's some energy code updates. The bulk upload spreadsheet is going to update. We're adding company collaborators so you can collaborate within the DDX. And then there's also a new article in our on the DDX in the help. There's a link to it in our help section. I don't know if you are all familiar with the White House and the Department of Energy recently came up with a national definition of a zero emissions building. They got input from very similar organizations, the ones that are listed here on the ECHO project, but a whole host of organizations around operational carbon. They're doing the same around embodied carbon, although it probably won't come out before next Tuesday. So there's an article about that operational carbon definition, that definition of zero emissions building. So I would advocate for you all to look at that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about doing more with your DDX data and my visualization. So all the stuff on the AIA's website, I help advise on those updates, but they are not my work alone. Whereas the things I'm going to share with you now is my work at Malem. So doing more with your data. So I feel like a lot of firms who are part of the AIA 2030 commitment come up with a visualization that looks something like this. It tracks the target in green, which is a pre-attentive value and a culturally understood as a good thing. So green is the target and it steps up 10% every 5 years. Blue is Malem's progress over time. And another thing I'm showing on here is future, hopefully target of performance. So in light blue, I've got a line that we actually would have to meet a 5% reduction per year to get to the 2030 target. I feel often when we look at these timeframes, we often just focus on what we've done, but not on the future. So this is showing both. And then 2030 signatories in light gray. So all the 400 plus firms that are submitting their data annually, where they are in relationship to the target, as well as Malem's work. So I've been creating charts like this to share back to our office from like a zoomed out perspective, like this is how we're doing on average with all of our work. But I've also been creating visualizations to look at all of our project data, both individually and as a collective. And that's what I'm going to share with you all today. So I created a visualization called a low carbon dashboard. And I think I put a link. Is there a link that can be shared in the chat? I've added it to the Word doc we were using to organize this. I don't know if Alejandra,
Yeah,
you
we'll
could
add
do
that. No worries.
You did. I don't have the chat up anymore, but I'm trying to find it. Where did it go? Chat. There it is. So this is a Tableau public dashboard. So this is available for anybody to download from Tableau public and then insert their own AIA DDX data into it. So it is released under a close a CC where it's basically like with attribution, you can use the visualizations as you see fit with your own data. And it's really a series of 4 dashboards. So this is just the introductory page that you'll see. Yeah, there's the link there. Thank you. So there's an introduction. It tells you about how to use the dashboard. You'll have to download some additional Excel files to make it work correctly, especially for the embodied carbon portion of it, because it takes your embodied carbon intensity data and it compares it to the current benchmark we have, which is the CLF benchmark, I believe, from 2017. There's also an Excel file that has operational carbon emissions factors for each of the eGrid subregions. But the 4 dashboards are around net PUI reduction. So this is the first one I created a handful of years ago. This one I think will work with most data sets because I share this with the entire audience. Where is it? Yeah, please share the link with the entire audience. It's fine. Oh, can you share the link via the chat? Oh, it sounds like the link was only shared amongst the panelists and not amongst everybody. So yeah, please share it. Maybe I can copy it. Hosts and panelists. Oh, I can't do it. So hopefully somebody else can before we're done here. The second dashboard is operational carbon intensity. So this visualization will work if you have fuel sources. Then there's embodied carbon intensity. This visualization will work if you are tracking your embodied carbon on your project work, which I hope you all are. And then there's a project dashboard. So this looks at a particular project, energy efficiency, operational carbon, and embodied carbon. So we'll dive into how to utilize this Tableau dashboard for your own DDX data. I'll go through this quickly, and if you have questions, I'm happy to help. Just DM me. So you go to your DDX, you go to all projects, you hit the download button. There's this export all button here. You select the phases most recently, imperial units, you hit download. There's a Dropbox link on the instructions page, which gives you the CLF benchmark data and gives you the emissions factor data. So you have to download those. If you do not have a Tableau public account, I would advocate you create one. It is a great tool. It is a free tool. So for those of you who are just getting into this or not familiar with it, you can download the desktop version. They also have a web version. It is 100% free. Everything gets saved to this online social media account that's called Tableau Public, where then you can share it with others. You can also hide it and make it private if you're concerned about that data. You don't want it to be shared more widely. So create a Tableau Public account, download the application. This is the link that you'll see if you hit the little share button on the top right here and click download Tableau workbook. That is basically the file that is all the visualization settings for these series of dashboards. Then inside of the application, you open the workbook you just downloaded. You have to link the Excel files. So one is your DDX export, so the data you've downloaded from the DDX. You also have to link the CLF benchmark and the emissions factor. And once you do all that, it should work. I will walk through it now. So I'm going to go back to sharing, stop share. Start share. I'm going to do screen 2. Okay, so this is that intro page. There's that share button on the top right if you want to download it. The first dashboard, sorry, I just refreshed. This is net PUI reduction. So this is all of Malem's data over the past 10 years, anonymized. So there's not project names on here. It just names it by project type. And you will get for the net PUI reduction dashboard and all the dashboards, really, there's a set of filters on the left. And these are all filters that are created from the data you're already importing to the DDX. So things like location, country, state, city, which office. So we have a Seattle and a Portland office. I can filter by one of those. If it is energy modeled, yes or no. If it has on-site renewables, I like to do this one because if I click on PV, I can see just my renewable friends here, projects here with renewable electricity. And usually the area weighted reduction is much better if I just look at my PV projects. And then project related filters as well, like use type, what design phase it's in, and even what the project name is, if you just want to filter by project name. And these are 3 visualizations. One is a map, one is a tree map, which is the area, which I actually find really helpful when you're thinking about how one project affects all the others, because the 67% reduction is an area weighted average. And then this is basically just a list in a bar chart that shows the longer the bar chart, using that pre-attentive value of length is better. Is more efficient. So this project is at 86% gross reduction and a 94% net PUI reduction. There's the target here, the 80%. There's this area weighted average line here. And then I'm also using color as a pre-attentive value here as well. Also green, like the greener the better. So you'll see here, there's one tan project, so that is not performing quite as well. All these are linked together. So if I wanted to just highlight on my largest half, that half of my project area, that's the largest, I can do that. Or if I just wanted to highlight the projects that are performing the best, I can do that. It'll show me. You can do the same thing with the map. If I just wanted to look at the projects that are in the Seattle-ish area, I can do that as well. I can also go back in time, which is really useful when talking about our progress. So this is just 2023 year data. This is only the data we collected last year, but if say I go back in time to 2020, you can see that pre-attentive value of color kind of jumping out at you here, where it's like, oh, there's a lot more tan and light green here instead of the dark green. And then I can select on any year that we've submitted data for. So this is the PUI reduction dashboard by year. If we go into operational carbon intensity, this is only if you have fuel sources. So if you are not reporting fuel sources through the DDX, you will not get this visualization, will just be blank. Again, the same type of filters on the left. This one is a little bit simpler. It is just a bar chart by project name. You'll see your actual project names here when you use your DDX data. And then I'm using the pre-attentive value of length to talk about the amount of operational carbon. So the longer the bar, the worse. But I'm also using the pre-attentive value of color to highlight different types of emissions. So the brown emissions are gas, the blue emissions are electricity, and the yellow avoided emissions are all the avoided emissions that happen on the left side of that zero line from your renewables that are on site or off-site, dedicated off-site. I've also got a color key down here at the bottom that is also a bar chart in a way that sums up all of the emissions from electricity, avoided emissions from renewables, and emissions from gas for the entire view. And then it gives you the sum total. So you can see, we have one project here that actually has negative operational emissions because the amount of on-site renewables on this project. Same thing can be done here with filtering by year. You can see I have a lot fewer years here because we have not been collecting fuel source data for as long as we've been collecting predicted energy use intensity data. I've also put some key performance indicators at the top of both the operational and embodied carbon visualization that are just totals. So this is the total for the filtered selection. And then this is offsets. This is an interesting one. You'll notice there's quite a large difference here. So this is saying for all the projects that are reported here, if you wanted to offset the emissions in 1 year, it would be somewhere between $81,000 and $685,000. And that's mostly because there's really no agreed upon price for offsetting your emissions. There's everything from under 20 bucks a square foot, a metric ton, to well over $150 a metric ton. So that gives you some sense of scale for offsetting. And then there's another way to look at emissions when it comes to the equivalency being how many acres of trees it would take to absorb those emissions and offset those emissions. So this is an acre. So quite impactful, 5,000 acres for all this project work. The embodied carbon dashboard is similar to the operational carbon dashboard. Again, we're using the pre-attentive value of length. The longer your line, the more embodied carbon you have. And then the pre-attentive value of color I've used to separate which tools we're using. So I'm sure the energy modelers here know that one energy model may do something slightly in a different way than another energy model would. So you try to energy model with the same tool. Same thing for embodied carbon, some embodied carbon modeling tools calculate different scopes, different life cycles than other embodied carbon modeling tools. So I've given them their own color. So for us in this year, we had about a dozen projects using Epic, about the same using Tally, and then some build carbon neutral and CARE projects as well. So that's what the different colors are. You get averages for each of those. And then the dots you'll see is that CLF benchmark that I was talking about previously, where you're pulling in that CLF benchmark data into the visualization so that you can see, what project type, what should I be shooting for? What number should I be shooting for? So this one is saying for this lodging residence hall, the benchmark is 668. You can see it's well below that. There's probably a bunch of reasons that could be, what this visualization does not include is the narrative about the project. Like, why is this low? Were we not measuring our superstructure, or was it all mass timber building? Like, I'm not sure until you actually tell the story of the project, but it is also helpful to have the data in front of you. So this has the same number of filters and same key performance indicators at the top, the total, the offsets, and the equivalencies for sequestering that carbon. And then the last one is the project dashboard that basically takes one of those lines in the bar charts and it shows all three operate. So this is for this particular education K-12 school. It's energy reduction, it's operational carbon, and it's embodied carbon in relationship to the CLF benchmark, and which fuel sources it was using and what the emissions factor is. And then again, you can filter by year like you can on the other ones, and you can filter by, you can select which project you want to look at. I think that's it. I think the last thing I was going to share is just how to get in touch with me. I work at Malum Architects. You can find me on Tableau Public. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Strava if you like riding bikes. And I will open it up for questions.
Really cool, Jesse. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm one of those people who's trying to get their firms to be more consistent in our reporting. But of course, we face issues in terms of, okay, how do we stay consistent and have a system that actually works long term? So even if we have someone who takes on this responsibility, it's easier and more dynamic, you know. I would recommend the audience to start filling in those questions. I think we already have some, so I'll get started on those. Something that came in, if we use the file that you just shared with us and perhaps the dollar per ton changes, will those changes and the values get updated once we try to update them, or is it more like a static version right now that we have to redo every time?
Yeah, you have to. So when you download the data from the DDX, it's an Excel file. It's linked into Tableau. There's not like a direct connection between the two. I'm not that fancy. There is an API that you can push data into the DDX, but I don't think there's a way to pull it out of the DDX. So no, it's not. It's just an Excel file and Tableau Public. That's it.
Got it. Another question I had, and I see there's a similar question here. Would you show these graphics more internally or also share them with the clients? And what do you say resonates with them? What is there a specific visualization that really clicks with the clients, or is it more that you have to really dive deep into each graphic that you're showing?
Yeah, I would say most of it is most of the visualizations you saw there are used internally to report back to our firm as a whole. We also use them like the speedometer. We have internal update meetings for all the shareholders to see where we stand on energy use reduction on every single project. But we do use those same, portions, I would say. We wouldn't show the whole portfolio of projects to a particular client, but we would show the UI speedometer. For embodied carbon, the visualizations we show for embodied carbon are different. They're usually around a particular tally export or using a tool like Epic to show different reduction paths. But we don't. Yeah, this tool is mostly about understanding where you are as a firm, and less about sharing it with client work, I would say.
Right. It's more internal, which is
the speedometer we share all the time with our clients, but the like whole list of projects with operational carbon and embodied carbon intensity, it's not something we share during trying to get a new project or trying to convince a client what energy efficiency or embodied carbon reduction measure to use.
We also have some questions specific to Tableau. There are two main concerns. First and foremost, it's about safety, because you mentioned that it's like a public tool. How do we be anonymous in terms of making sure that we are not leaking any sort of client information when we are hosting this on public servers? Maybe I'll let you answer.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, most of the work we do is public work at Malum, but all the work that has project names, which you haven't seen, is still on a Tableau public account, but you can hide certain files so that they're not accessible to the general public. If you go to my Tableau public page, you'll only see one file, and it's just the one that has all the anonymized names. So if you are comfortable with it living on a public server, as long as nobody can find it, like nobody can put in a Google search and find it, then it's okay. If you're not comfortable with that, you would have to pay for the software, and the Tableau software allows you to host it locally or host it on your own private server. I think Tableau Public also allows you to save it to your desktop now too. So there might be to use Tableau Public and save it to your desktop.
I did use Tableau in grad school and I loved it. I mean, it's so easy. Generally, you don't have to go through any tutorials and you make these beautiful visualizations just like that. But of course, at that time, they did not have a public version. So we were on the educational
Oh, I see.
version. Yeah, that had like a bunch of different competencies, which was great.
I see there's a question about the difference between Power BI and Tableau. I think they honestly do a lot of the same things. I know a lot of firms choose to use Power BI if they already have an Office 365 account. I think that's fine. You know, they link an Excel file or they link a database and they visualize it and allow you to filter it. And so I don't think there's I mean, I'm not as facile with Power BI, so I can't really speak to the differences, but they do very similar things. It's just which one you're used to using.
There's also a question on how easy or possible it is to download the graphics as an image from Tableau, or is it more you taking screen?
Yeah, it's not as easy as I would like it. I often get this question from staff because they want like that speedometer for energy in their project presentation, and it's really just screen clipping things. Like I zoom in, I screen clip it, I paste it in. It does have if you go to share, you can hit download image, but I've found that often when it converts all these like vector things to pixels, it'll mess up on the text, like the text alignment will be funny. So I will often just screen clip it.
And is it high resolution? Could be.
It's as high resolution as what you have on screen, so if you're
I see.
printing a billboard of it, it's probably not going to look that great. I'd keep it in Tableau so it's all line-based instead of pixel-based.
Another question we have is, will the AIA incorporate operational and embodied carbon data to the DDX instead of just EY?
It currently does. So there's been operational fuel source information has been around a handful of years. At least I should know this off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I don't. Embodied carbon data, a little bit less. I want to say it's been like 3 years, 4 years for embodied carbon. So you can put both. It started off as just predicted energy use intensity, but now you can do fuel sources. It'll calculate the operational carbon intensity for you. You can put just one number for embodied carbon intensity, and then you can select which scopes and life cycle stages are included in that number, but you can't separate the number out. I think that's part of the effort with the ECHO reporting schema and making sure that that number and the way we're reporting is similar to the way other mechanical, structural, landscape are reporting.
And is it possible right now to for folks or firms to upload their own DDX spreadsheets, which could be updated regularly? Can they feed that into Tableau, or is it necessary that they use their own static file that they download from DDX?
Yeah, I mean, once you download the data from the DDX, you can do whatever you want with it. You can just.
But they can't use their own internal file right now to upload into Tableau.
Into Tableau, yes, you could. Yeah, I mean, Tableau will take any Excel file in any format. You cannot download the research data. So that research tab I showed you with the box and whisker, that is all of the projects in the DDX. I think you can download that box and whisker. So those 70 projects or whatever that I had filtered out. It won't tell you what the project name is, where they're located, all that stuff. It'll just tell you what the overall percentiles are in that box and whisker.
And this question is not related to graphics specifically, but I was wondering if you would have any advice for folks out there who are just starting on the 2030 commitment, any resources that you found useful when you were starting up?
Yeah, I would say start small. It does seem like a big lift, especially when you're talking about energy modeling and figuring out your fuel sources and doing embodied carbon modeling. It is a lot. I would start small, right? We started small. We started with just a handful of projects. You could even see our data was kind of wonky the first handful of years, probably because we didn't know what we were doing. But start small, track 1 or 2 projects, track a handful of projects, just stick with PEUI. You don't even need to have an energy model. You can use the DDX and it will calculate a predicted energy use intensity for you if you just put in the energy code. and your use type and your climate zone, it'll just come up with a estimate. And then if you have a project that has an energy model, you can put that data in. So you can have some that are energy models, some that are not. So you just start small, because it does seem daunting. And then after you do it year after year after year, it just gets simpler, especially on architectural work where projects span multiple years. You know, the K-12 work I do, it can take 3 to 5 years to go from design through construction. So that EY number, those numbers don't change that much, especially at the latter half of the project. They mostly change in the beginning. So it gets easier to report year after year.
That's great. And because you took this at the Project Stashio logo, I would bring this question up, which where someone asked, would you make the same pie chart comment to the Florence Nightingale graphic? Going back to your point about that.
I might, yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful, that rose diagram is beautiful. I think, you know, it helps that it's not about that pre-attentive value of area. It's not really using that because each of the pies are the same size, right? They're just representing a month of roughly an equal size, and it's the length. So we're using the pre-attentive value of length to see how many deaths there are per month. Whereas generally pie charts, you're trying to calculate area of a pie instead of length. So it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit, even though it's calculating, you know, it's showing you length, the fact that it's getting wider as you go out implies that there are more deaths, right? When it's really, there aren't. So those bars should really be parallel instead of, but,
Right.
you know,
I mean,
when
it's
I see Florence, I'll tell her.
it's a decent graphic. I mean, good for its times. But I'm also curious to know if you have any other stories of graphics gone wrong where you were trying to send a message that did not hit the nail. Any graphics that failed at actually influencing the design that you were trying, or maybe it's not on you or some other person's graphic.
Yeah, I'd say the like the 2030 commitment graphic, it's essentially a stacked column chart that's over time, right? The x-axis is years. I think those are incredibly effective, whether you're talking about time or whether you're talking about different options, right? Start it on the left, option A is the worst option, and as you make series of decisions, option Z or D is the best option. I think a simple stacked column chart are incredibly effective in telling a story because we read from left to right. When you're talking about reduction of impact, you know, the pre-attentive value of length getting smaller and smaller as you step from left to right. Those are incredibly effective.
There's a question, a very specific question, if you have any tips for visuals or diagramming with cost and time as variables. So oftentimes we are asked to compare upfront costs versus future operations or other sustainable benefits. So how have you done it, or what would you recommend?
Cost, I mean, time over time, a line chart or a bar chart with the x-axis being time. I'd say almost always when you're talking about time, that time axis should be on the bottom from left to right. That's just intuitively how we read time. When it comes to cost, I mean, the pre-attentive value of color and green like tends to work. A line chart tends to work, or bars as you step down or up from left to right. Cost and time as variables, yeah.
Wait, we should have another webinar or a workshop on this. That would be cool.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to cost, I often I like get the Excel file and I always use the data bars highlight in Excel so I can see, you know, in relationship. It just gives you an automatic bar chart, one versus the other, and then two columns next to each other. Make sure those columns are the same size so that your bars are, you know, relatively relational to one another. Excel. I don't know, that's my answer. Not a great answer.
That was great. I know we are already at time. Thank you, Jesse. I'll hand it over to Jackie to bring us home. And thank you, everyone who's been with us so far. Over to
You're
you.
welcome. yeah, please reach out to me anytime. I love talking about this stuff.
Yes, thank you so much to Jesse and Kritika and Alejandra for your time today. We really appreciate it. As a reminder, this webinar will be available on YouTube, uploaded either today or tomorrow. And if you would like your AIA credit, please send me an email, admin@IBPSA-US. Thank you all for joining us today. Have a wonderful day and a good weekend.